Hey everybody, welcome back to Horror Trans. This is Stephanie Bree, and today I'm tackling the Scream franchise. Starting with the original from 1996, directed by Wes Craven. So, it's going to be hard for me to say anything about this movie that hasn't already been said before, so I'm just going to give my take on it. When Scream first came out, I wasn't interested in it. The reason I wasn't interested in it is because I didn't like Wes Craven's New Nightmare. In fact, I hated Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Go ahead and check out my other video on that for how much I hate that movie. And so when I found out Wes Craven was doing another meta movie, I wasn't interested. So a few years went by and I watched Scary Movie, which was riffing on Scream. And I thought it was funny. So I decided to watch the movie it was based on, so I did watch the original Scream. So, I'm not going to give a recap because this movie has been done to death. It's two killers in a mask, and they cut up a bunch of teens. But what makes this different is it's what they call meta. So, you have characters who recognize the rules of a horror movie, and so they are telling the other teens how to survive a horror movie because they assume that they're in one because there's a serial killer on the loose, which is interesting for a film premise but unusual if you're supposed to take it seriously, because that's not how you psychoanalyze serial killers. But that is the direction Scream went. So I'm just going to talk about the kills. So the first kill we get on screen, actually we get one that's kind of off screen first. It's Drew Barrymore's character's boyfriend, and I don't remember the names of the characters, all of them. So I apologize for that. We see him killed off screen, and then there's a chase scene, and then Drew Barrymore dies. She is stabbed to death, and then she's hung from a tree and gutted. Pretty brutal. The next death we see is Rose McGowan, and she is in the garage, and she gets stabbed, and she tries to run away. And her death is actually pretty cool. So she gets in the doggy door, the garage door, and she gets stuck because her boobs are too big to fit through the doggy door. And the killer lifts the garage door, and that's how he kills her. What's interesting about Rose McGowan's character is, again, I don't remember her character's name, but what's interesting about her character is she's actually the daughter of one of the police officers in this movie. Now, I worked in journalism for a lot of years, so my biggest gripe with a lot of horror movies is they always get the sheriff wrong. And what I mean by that is they always have a sheriff investigating these small town murders, but in real life, sheriffs have jurisdiction in the counties, and they're elected officials. They're not hired. And in town, you would have a police department, and you'd have a chief of police, and they are hired by the mayor. It's a nitpick. It's a gripe. It's pedantic. I don't care. I worked in journalism for a lot of years, and I covered a lot of crimes. That being said, there is a character in this movie who is a journalist. A couple of them, actually. Well, there's cameraman Kenny, who does die in a pretty brutal way. And then there's Gale Weathers, who is a staple of the franchise, played by Courtney Cox. So the next kill happens kind of off screen. We see a little bit of it. It's the principal, played by Henry Winkler. We see a little bit of it, but we hear more about it later on at the party, where they're watching Halloween, the original, and they're talking about the rules to survive a scary movie. And I do not remember the character's name, but again, he's played by Jamie Kennedy, and he is one of the red herrings. So spoilers. I'm going to spoil these movies. I should have said that up front. So, he's one of the red herrings, but they want you to think he's the killer. And then the next round of kills happens inside the house at the party where they've cleared out. There's some chase scenes, which Scream is famous for its chase scenes, and we meet our heroine and our quote final girl, played by Neve Campbell, and she's actually, I do know her name. She's Sidney Prescott. They say her name a bajillion times in these movies, so it's stuck in my head. So, Sydney is the one who's being stalked, and it turns out at the end we find out that it's her boyfriend and his friend Stu who's doing the stalking. The boyfriend's name is Billy Loomis. The only reason why I remember that is because of Dr. Loomis from Halloween. I just watched all the Halloween movies, so the name Loomis is stuck in my head. And again, they say Billy Loomis like a bunch of times in these movies. And Stu Macher, who's the other killer. And basically, their plan is to frame Sidney's dad for the murders, and then they're going to kill Sidney, and they're going to make it look like he attacked them, and they barely survived. Now, Gail shows up to try to save the day. Dewey shows up to save the day. Dewey gets stabbed in the back in the first of many attacks, where again you think he's dead, but he actually survives the movie. And out of desperation, Sydney takes the gun and shoots her boyfriend in the head because the killer always comes back. And the other guy, Stu, actually I think the real killer or the boyfriend killed him on accident because he stabbed him too many times in his fake attack. So that's the summary of Scream, as best as I can sum it up. Now, what do I think of this movie? I'm torn. I'm torn because I hate meta movies, and I hate breaking the fourth wall. I hate when movies reference other movies. So, like, they're sitting in the movie, they're sitting in the house watching Halloween, and they're talking about Halloween. So now Halloween exists in this franchise as a movie, even though in the Halloween franchise it exists as its own canon. I hate it when they do that. But anyways, these movies are very meta, so that does kind of, normally that would turn me off, but Scream does it really well, in fact. The other thing about Scream is it changed the horror landscape permanently. For one, it made horror movies more self-aware, and it did change the tropes, so a lot of what was popular in the 80s was no longer popular in the 90s, and Scream came along and sort of revived the slasher franchise, which gave it new life. We've had a whole bunch of new slashers because of Scream. The slasher franchise was just barely limping along on life support in the 90s. Most of your big name slasher franchises had died out or had gone to space or done other stupid shit, so they had changed. So Scream is full of humor, but it's not over the top humor. It's not that like obnoxious humor that I can't stand in a horror movie. So it's not like Shaun of the Dead or Evil Dead 2. It's nothing like that. So it's like it's acceptable levels of humor. So I actually really like the first Scream, and I definitely recommend it. I have Scream in my DVD collection, and this is a buy. I definitely recommend that you get it in your DVD collection. Now, I just got done watching all 6 Scream movies, so they're fresh on my mind. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the rest of them in the franchise, but I am going to go ahead and jump ahead a little bit and say that some of these are going to be buys and some of these are going to be rents. So definitely check out my other videos on the franchise to find out which ones I think you should own and which ones I think you should avoid. Stay cool.